If you're someone who genuinely feels a sense of relief when plans get canceled, or who looks forward to a quiet evening more than a crowded night out, there's a reason for that. And it's deeper than just liking to stay home. There's a pattern in how your mind and body respond to the world around you. A lot of people assume this comes down to personality, that you're either outgoing or reserved, social or antisocial. But in reality, it's more about how your nervous system processes stimulation. Some people naturally feel more alive in busy environments, conversations overlapping, music playing, constant movement. That kind of energy doesn't overwhelm them. It fuels them. But for you, even enjoyable social interactions come with a subtle cost. You might laugh, engage, and genuinely have a good time. But underneath that, there's a quiet draining happening. It's slow, almost invisible, but by the time you get home, you feel it. That sense of needing to be alone again, to reset. Psychology explains this through something called optimal arousal. Everyone has a different threshold for how much stimulation feels just right. When that level is exceeded, your body starts to feel tension instead of comfort. So what looks like you avoiding social situations is often just you trying to return to a state where your mind can function clearly again. And that's where home comes in. Home isn't just a physical place for you. It's where the noise fades, where you don't have to perform, respond, or adjust yourself to match the energy around you. It's the one environment where your baseline returns to normal without effort. That's why, when you're there, everything feels lighter. Not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is demanding anything from you. But there's another layer to this that people rarely acknowledge. For many, staying home isn't only about conserving energy. It's about having control over your environment in a way the outside world doesn't allow. When you step outside, you enter spaces that aren't designed around you. Conversations don't always go the way you expect. People interrupt, plans shift. You're exposed to noise, unpredictability, and subtle social pressures that require constant adjustment. Even small things, like having to respond at the right moment or keep a conversation going, can quietly build tension over time. At home, all of that disappears. You decide the pace of everything, the lighting, the sounds, the atmosphere. So that you can sit in silence without it being awkward. You can think without being interrupted. You can exist without explaining yourself. That sense of control might not seem like much to someone who doesn't need it. But for someone who feels deeply or notices everything, it changes everything. If you're highly aware of your surroundings, if you pick up on tone shifts, facial expressions, unspoken tension, being outside can feel like your brain is constantly processing more than it wants to. It's not just about what's being said, it's about everything underneath it. And that kind of awareness doesn't turn off easily. So staying home becomes more than a preference. It becomes a way to regulate your internal state, a way to step out of constant input and give your mind a chance to settle back into clarity. In that space, yet you don't have to filter yourself. You don't have to anticipate reactions. You don't have to keep up. You can just be. There's also something else happening when you spend more time alone. Your attention naturally shifts inward, and that changes the way you experience life. When you're not constantly reacting to external noise, your mind starts to explore things more deeply. Thoughts don't get cut off halfway. Emotions don't get pushed aside. You have the time and space to actually sit with them. That's why people who enjoy solitude often develop a stronger sense of self-awareness. You start to notice patterns in how you think. You begin to understand your own reactions instead of just moving past them. You reflect on conversations, decisions, even small moments that others would forget within minutes. And from the outside, it might look like you're doing nothing. But internally, there's a lot unfolding. This is also where creativity tends to grow. Not necessarily in loud, dramatic bursts, but in quiet, subtle ways. Ideas form slowly. Connections appear where you didn't expect them. You start to see things differently, not because you're trying to, but because your mind has the space to wander without interruption. Some of your clearest thoughts probably don't happen when you're surrounded by people. They happen late at night when everything is still. Or during simple moments, sitting alone, listening to something soft, letting your mind drift without pressure. And in those moments, you're not disconnected from life. You're actually engaging with it in a deeper way. So staying home isn't empty. It's where your inner world becomes active. Where things make sense. Where clarity slowly builds without being forced. At the same time, it's important to approach this honestly, because not every reason for staying home comes from a place of peace. For some people, it's not about comfort. It's about avoidance. There are moments when staying in doesn't feel calming. It feels heavy, like leaving would require more energy than you have. Like being around people would expose something you're not ready to face. That could come from social anxiety, past experiences, or even a quiet sense of disconnection that builds over time. In those cases, home can slowly shift from being a refuge into something more limiting. That's why it helps to ask yourself a simple question. When you choose to stay home, what does it feel like? Does it feel like relief or resistance? Relief feels light. It feels like your body finally relaxing, like you're returning to yourself. Resistance feels different. It feels like hesitation, like something is being avoided rather than chosen. And the two can look identical from the outside. Understanding that difference doesn't mean forcing yourself to change. It just gives you awareness. Because sometimes what you need is rest, and other times what you need might be a small step back into the world, on your own terms, at your own pace. Both can exist at the same time. You can love staying home and still need connection. You can enjoy solitude and still feel moments of loneliness. That doesn't make you inconsistent. It makes you human. There's also a quiet truth most people don't admit. The world often celebrates a very specific kind of life. Being out, being seen, constantly doing something, and constantly sharing something. It's presented as the right way to live, the exciting way, the meaningful way. So if you don't naturally lean toward that, it can make you question yourself. You might wonder if you're missing out, if you should be saying yes more often, if your version of a good time is somehow less valid because it's quieter, slower, less visible. But what if it's not? What if your idea of a good life doesn't need to look like anyone else's? For some people, joy comes from movement and noise. For you, it might come from stillness, from a familiar routine, from doing the same small things that bring a sense of comfort again and again. Maybe it's making the same drink every evening, sitting in the same spot, watching something you've already seen, not because you have nothing new to watch, but because it feels safe and predictable. There's a kind of peace in that consistency, and it's not something you have to explain or justify, because fulfillment isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, almost invisible to everyone else, but deeply real to you. For people who genuinely enjoy staying home, there's often a strong connection to small, meaningful rituals. Not big, dramatic experiences, but simple, repeated moments that slowly build a sense of stability. You start to notice things others overlook. The way the light changes throughout the day, the feeling of your space when everything is in its place, the comfort of silence that doesn't need to be filled. These moments don't seem important on the surface, but over time they create something deeper, a sense of grounding. And when you have that you don't feel the same urge to constantly seek something outside. Your environment already gives you what you need. This is what psychologists sometimes refer to as a preference for lower stimulation. It doesn't mean you lack curiosity or excitement. It means your threshold for enough is different. You don't need as much external input to feel content. In fact, too much of it can take you out of that state. So instead of chasing more, you naturally settle into less. Less noise, less pressure, less need to perform. And in that space, something else grows. Clarity, presence, a stronger connection to your own thoughts and feelings. You don't rely on the outside world to constantly entertain you, because your inner world already has depth. So if you're someone who turns down invitations without guilt, who feels genuinely okay spending time alone, who finds comfort in your own space instead of chasing something outside, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not missing life. You're just experiencing it in a quieter, more intentional way. And sometimes that kind of life holds more depth than anything the outside world can offer. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.